Hello, today is Wednesday, April 29th, and welcome to episode 589 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by my boss, founder and executive director Jamil Jaffer, NSI Advisory Board member Les Munson, and Director of Policy John Lipsey. I should say Director of Policy / NSI Senior Fellow John Lipsey. Titled, he likes to be ambiguous with us. Okay. So we're turning to one of our favorite topics, energy. We've been talking about a lot about energy on the show, but we're going from a slightly different angle today. Today's story is about the UAE, United Arab Emirates, announcing that the country is planning to leave OPEC after nearly 6 decades as one of the group's most influential members. OPEC, or the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is a cartel of major oil-producing countries that coordinate how much oil they produce in order to help manage global oil supply and stabilize prices. There's a bunch of countries in it, including Saudi Arabia, and there's actually an OPEC Plus group that includes partners like Russia. Altogether, OPEC Plus accounts for roughly 40% of global oil production. In addition to that power, it also has just been for decades a major coordination hub, and it's just a pillar of the global energy markets. So the UAE's decision to step away from the system obviously comes at a point of sustained kind of regional tension and question marks. There's the ongoing conflict with Iran. There's pressure basically halting on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of our favorite topics here on the show, and just kind of growing questions about stability in the region in the long term. So leaving OPEC gives UAE more freedom to increase production and kind of make its own economic decisions, and also sends a political signal. So guys, there's a lot to talk about here. John, I'm going to turn first to you because we're always so excited to have you on the show. You're like the ghost that sometimes is there haunting us, and most of the time you're away. So, first of all, how significant is it that the UAE is leaving OPEC? Is this unusual? What does this mean for global energy markets? What does this mean for the U.S.?
Yeah, there have been a few departures in the past, but I think I think it's fair to say that this time is different. I think there are a couple of ways to come at this. One is I think we should point out and acknowledge that this is probably a long tail effect of the U.S. becoming a dominant energy superpower, and the power of the market, and its influence and its ability to be nimble against changing global economic conditions, and how that's impacted the cohesion of the OPEC cartel over the last couple decades. And so that is certainly part of the story here. The more concrete aspect here is that the UAE is just has been grating against the constraints on their energy production for at least a decade or so. This has been a fairly public spat between them and Riyadh. And they are looking to increase production, and they see a world where when eventually the Strait of Hormuz opens again, we are going to have a massive amount of demand in the global market, trying to rebuild inventories among as well as just meet the increase in demand. And so the UAE just wants the flexibility to be able to meet that, and they are extricating themselves from that debate, those constraints, that consensus that has to be reached within OPEC. But make no mistake, this is a big deal. This is a momentous event. We will see over time, of course, to what degree OPEC, the remaining members of OPEC, are able to stay together and have influence over price. I think the other thing that this foretells is the ongoing rivalry between UAE and Riyadh that is taking place not just in energy markets, but in Yemen and in Sudan, and in competition within the region to be the new sort of economic superpowers, diversifying their economies. So a lot for the United States to manage across its relationship with these two competing powers in the region.
Okay, Jamil, you next. What do you think are the main drivers? John brought up competition in the region. He brought up, the country wanting to have more independence when it comes to production capacity. And to John's last point about, the U.S., do you think the Trump administration sees this as maybe a risk to stability in the region, or as an opportunity to strengthen its partnership with UAE?
Well, look, obviously, President Trump has been very supportive of his relationships with a lot of the Middle East players, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, perhaps most famously, but Saudi Arabia as well. And so the president spread out his largesse across the region, across our Sunni Arab allies, the oil producing countries. It's interesting because, UAE is the number 3 largest producer in OPEC, second to or third to Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It makes up about 10 to 15% of OPEC supplies, which makes it a very influential player. And so its departure, to John's point, exactly right, could be the thing that crushes the back of OPEC. When you lose a major producer like that, it starts producing independently. That, I think, is good in some sense for President Trump in the sense that it should, in theory, lower the world price of oil if UAE produces more. The problem is today, a lot of that oil can't get out because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And so in the immediate period, it's not going to help much unless, of course, the U.S. starts escorting ships through the strait, which isn't yet in the cards. There are some who think that the blockade is working, and I don't disagree that it's actually putting some significant pressure on Iran. The problem, of course, is that Iran is not yet buckled. Gas prices, oil prices remain high. President Trump remains under the political pressure he was before. And the real question is, who's going to blink first? Is it going to be Donald Trump and the United States, or is it going to be Iran and its oversupply of oil that's now starting to back up inside of Iran that they may not have a place to store it, which might require them to shut in their wells? Iran does not appear to be ready to back down. They've never complied with the ceasefire the U.S. put in place, not for one single day, regardless of the fact the U.S. has stopped bombing them. So we went down this blockade road. It isn't doing what we hoped it would do. It might be putting pressure on them, but that pressure is taking time. So unless they crack, we'll see. But right now, it doesn't look like it's really doing the job we want it to do.
Okay, Les, I'm turning to you, our wild card. What does this, what do you think this means for the future of OPEC? Is this just the first domino to fall? Like Jamil pointed out, that's almost 15% of, production supply within OPEC that's leaving. We've talked a bit about on this show about countries and, their independence in promoting their national interests. Is that just what, we've got UAE doing here? What do you think about, other countries in OPEC?
Well, first of all, let's all thank Barack Obama for unleashing the fracking revolution. I know that was an intentional decision of his, and it will be in his obituary when he dies in hopefully a long time.
Thank you for adding that last part, Les. I was like, wow, that went dark.
His most major achievement of his presidency, unleashing the U.S. fracking revolution. I guess I'm making the point here that OPEC may have been irrelevant before this. And that this is the logical consequence of the U.S. Having massively increased energy production. At the end of the day, we tend to ignore this because I think we collectively see the world through a bit of a fog. And the fog is, we're trying to fight climate change, therefore pipelines are bad and we should be skeptical of the oil industry and things like that. In fact, the opposite is true. This is the most essential thing to our economy and the economy of our friends and neighbors, our friends and allies around the world. And the fact that the U.S. is now a massive producer and exporter of energy resources is a really big deal. And it's going to change the dynamics around the globe. This is John's right. This is a logical consequence of that. I can't pretend to know what all of the consequences will be, but there will be others. Like, this is very disruptive to the world economy. We're in a very different place than we were in the 70s when OPEC flexed its muscles and was able to really impact our economy. And I totally disagree with Jamil. I actually think the blockade is incredibly effective, so long as President Trump can see it through to the end. If he's willing to take the heat politically, probably in November, if he's willing to endure some relatively modestly higher gas prices. I keep driving by gas stations where the price is in the $3 range, which seems not that terrible to me. Of course, I'm driving a Tesla, so I don't really care what the price of gas is.
Because I'm in DC, the number 3 is not the start of the number here.
Well, that's because you're dealing with a lot of artificially high taxes because of your one-party state government, which you should leave. And now that you're thinking about doing that, you should get out of there. Although they're probably turning my state of Virginia into something worse. That's what it appears to be. And I just want to make the other point that My favorite presidential candidate of 2024 was Doug Burgum, who is now the Secretary of the Interior and running the National Energy Dominance Council. And he talked repeatedly at campaign events about the importance of energy for our foreign policy. He was 1,000% correct. This proves him to be very prescient. I'm glad he's in our government in a key position where he can push the buttons and pull the levers and really take advantage of the situation that we have right now. I think he's clear-eyed and smart and is looking way down the road and is willing to have a very realistic view of world affairs.
Les is hosting a party for him for the 28.
Bergmentum is real.
I was almost like we should start a snippet at the show, like a poly market. Like we should weigh in, like, John, what does this episode mean for what we should be purchasing stock wise, right? Like I think we talk enough on the show about economics. We might be able to do a little segue there. All right, folks. We got a whole smattering there of topics to run to 28.
Hold on. Jones, hold on. Jamil, you got to argue with me. What are you doing?
I mean, you're obviously wrong. Like I don't know why I don't even know why I need to argue with you. You're obviously wrong. I already explained why. But hey, Bergmentum, off you go.
But you're not arguing because you agreed. You both said that the blockade is having an effect, but it needs to keep going if it's going to have an ultimate effect. You both said the same thing.
Same thing.
So there's nothing
To be clear, the blockade might work. What would really work is escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, because then world oil prices go down. The president just doesn't want to do that. Or, by the way, you know what would also work? Bombing Iran again, because they violated the ceasefire for 2.5 weeks and haven't done anything to deserve a ceasefire. But the president doesn't want to do that either. So I guess we'll just stick with the blockade.
Every foreign policy can be made better by bombing.
Or just
apparently every foreign policy can be by chickening out. Congratulations, Les.
We're not going to call it that's right. Chicken out.
Laco.
That was a great restaurant by my old apartment, by the way. It was called Chicken Out. Yeah, it was Chicken Out. It was a great place to go. Yeah.
Thank you, Lipsy, for just teeing up. You just turned on the level a little bit and the spout came. That was perfect. A great way to wrap today's episode. Thank you so much to Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Friday, May 1st. Wow, May already. I thought that was a typo. We are in May, folks. May 1st for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see a video of Jamil's den that has a fan going that might give you some a bit of a seizure, but check it out if you think you're brave. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.